Welcome to Xi Jinping Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Trust but verify, Biden warns Albanese on risks of dealing with China. With Ukraine and Israel looming, Australian PM arrives in Washington to meet Biden. U.S. ally Colombia swings towards China. Why the role of Chinese defense minister isn't exactly what it sounds like. Who needs warmongers when you have U.S. moral champions? Trust but verify, Biden warns Albanese on risks of dealing with China. The Sydney Morning Herald. U.S. President Joe Biden has warned Australia about the risks of dealing with China and emphasized America's commitment to stability in Asia. Biden stated that his administration would take on China and present the U.S. as a more reliable partner in the region. He also discussed plans to heighten strategic competition with China and compete with initiatives like China's Belt and Road Initiative. Additionally, Biden sent a message to Chinese President Xi Jinping that the U.S. is committed to peace and stability in the Pacific. Biden's comments came during a press conference with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in the Rose Garden of the White House. With Ukraine and Israel looming, Australian PM arrives in Washington to meet Biden. Yahoo! Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has arrived at the White House for a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. The two leaders are expected to discuss cybersecurity and the new Critical Minerals Task Force, which was launched as a joint venture between the two countries earlier this year. The meeting comes ahead of Albanese's visit to China next month, with senior administration officials saying that China and regional security issues are often discussed when U.S. and Australian leaders meet. U.S. ally Colombia swings towards China. Financial Times. China and Colombia have upgraded their relationship to a strategic partnership as Colombia's first leftist president, Gustavo Petro, met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. The move signifies Colombia's shift towards Beijing and away from its historical ties with the U.S. China has been seeking closer ties with South America and gaining a foothold in Colombia, a staunch U.S. ally with access to the Caribbean and Pacific, is particularly attractive to Beijing. The two countries agreed to various cooperation agreements, including boosting beef and quinoa exports to China and collaborating on science, technology, and green energy. Why the role of Chinese defense minister isn't exactly what it sounds like. South China Morning Post. The recent dismissal of China's former defense minister, Li Shangfu, has highlighted the complex and opaque nature of the command structure of the People's Liberation Army, PLA, and the role of the nation's defense chief. Unlike its counterparts in Western countries, China's defense minister is primarily seen as a public representative of the armed forces. The actual command power lies with the Central Military Commission, CMC, chaired by President Xi Jinping. The defense minister's role has diminished over the past 2 decades. The ministry had a wider range of responsibility in the first decades after the PLA won the Civil War in 1949. Who needs warmongers when you have U.S. moral champions? SCMP opinion. California Governor Gavin Newsom recently visited Hong Kong to promote climate cooperation between the San Francisco Bay Area and southern China. Despite rising tensions between the U.S. and China, Newsom's trip focused solely on climate and avoided other sensitive political or economic issues. However, he faced criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, who argued that he should address human rights concerns in Hong Kong. The author of the article argues that finding common ground between the world's top 2 polluters on climate change should be encouraged, rather than politicized. Are we right to fear China? Financial Times. 3 new books provide different perspectives on China's political system and its future trajectory. Yaxing Huang's The Rise and Fall of the East examines the underpinnings of China's political and social structure and argues that the system that has served China well in the past may be less successful in the future. Ian Johnson's Sparks focuses on Xi Jinping's attempts to rewrite history and the resistance of dissidents. Carrie Brown's China Incorporated pushes back against China bashing in Western capitals and argues for a less alarmist view of Xi's intentions. Huang argues that China's strongly centralized political system dates back to the Sui dynasty in 587 AD and the start of the country's imperial civil service exams. The system, which has endured in various forms, has allowed China to grow into a stronger and more unified state. However, Huang also notes that China's insistence on convergence, conformity and uniformity is deeply embedded in its history and that managing political and social diversity has been a constant challenge for its rulers. Johnson's book focuses on the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to rewrite history and the repression of dissenting voices. He highlights the CCP's use of myth-like stories to legitimize its hold on power and argues that only the Communist Party can save China from chaos and disintegration. Despite the state's efforts to erase dissenting voices, Johnson finds hope in the resilience of independent activists who are able to resist the surveillance state. Brown's book provides a more measured view of China's political system and argues against a negative reaction to Xi's policies. He predicts a future multilevel world order in which both the US and China remain important and suggests that China does not seek to replace the US as global hegemon. While Brown acknowledges the risks of Xi's rule, he suggests that a new era of relative reopening may be possible in the future. Biden orders Nvidia to immediately stop selling AI chips to China. Telegraph. The US government has ordered Nvidia to stop selling AI computer chips to China, as part of a ban that was brought forward by President Biden. Nvidia announced the restrictions, which will also apply to Russia and Iran, and will go into effect immediately. The ban was originally expected to be introduced in mid-November but has been implemented early as trade talks between the US and China begin. Nvidia downplayed the impact of the ban, stating that it does not expect it to have a significant impact on its financial results. The ban will affect 5 of Nvidia's chips. Antonio Guterres should act on China's genocide of the Uyghurs. Diplomat. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has been criticized for his lack of action in holding China accountable for its human rights abuses against the Uyghur people. Despite a United Nations report and statements from various experts and organizations, Guterres has not taken significant steps to address the issue. Critics argue that his reluctance may be due to the value he places on cooperation with China as a partner. However, there is a growing call for Guterres to take action and speak out against the Uyghur genocide. Gavin Newsom, on climate mission to China, gets an audience with Xi. New York Times. California Governor Gavin Newsom met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing as part of a week-long mission to negotiate climate partnerships. Newsom wants California to set an aggressive pace to cut carbon emissions and tackle climate change. The visit is part of a flurry of exchanges between Chinese and American officials that have raised expectations of a potential visit by Xi to the U.S. next month. Newsom's visit is seen as a potential opportunity to improve ties between the two countries. South China Sea, Beijing, Manila on collision course. Deutsche Welle. China and the Philippines are trading accusations of violating sovereignty in the disputed waters of the South China Sea after 2 naval collisions occurred on Sunday. The second Thomas Shoal, which Beijing claims to be in its territorial waters, saw a Chinese Coast Guard ship collide with a vessel resupplying the Philippine military station. A Chinese militia vessel then hit a Philippine Coast Guard ship. The Spratly Islands, to which many surrounding nations have laid a claim, have led to a breakdown in relations between China and the Philippines. In early 2023, the two nations pledged to create a direct emergency line to communicate in case of an escalation in the South China Sea. Since then, China has pointed a military laser at a Philippine Coast Guard ship and fired water cannon at a Philippine vessel. The Philippines has accused China of trying to occupy the second Thomas Shoal and has also made the dispute public by having camera crews on their ships document naval incidents with China. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension, here to bring you the latest news from around the world. Today, we discuss the warnings from US President Joe Biden to Australia about the risks of dealing with China, the bilateral meeting between Biden and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Colombia's shift towards China, the complex command structure of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, California Governor Gavin Newsom's visit to Hong Kong, different perspectives on China's political system, the US ban on Nvidia selling AI chips to China, the criticism of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres for his inaction on China's human rights abuses, Governor Newsom's meeting with President Xi Jinping, and the escalating tensions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea. Now, let's dive into the analysis. It's no surprise that President Biden is warning Australia about the risks of dealing with China. As China's influence grows, the US is keen to present itself as a reliable partner and competitor in the region. The meeting between Biden and Albanese shows the importance of cybersecurity and regional security issues when US and Australian leaders meet. Meanwhile, Colombia's shift towards China is a significant development, as it signals a departure from its historical ties with the US. China's focus on gaining a foothold in South America is part of its broader strategy to expand its influence globally. The complex command structure of the Chinese People's Liberation Army is another intriguing aspect. Unlike Western countries, China's defense minister is primarily a public representative, with the actual command power lying with the Central Military Commission chaired by President Xi Jinping. This highlights the opaque nature of China's military and political structure. Governor Newsom's visit to Hong Kong, focused solely on climate cooperation, has faced criticism from both sides of the political spectrum. While finding common ground on climate change is crucial, it's essential to address sensitive political and economic issues as well. However, it's worth noting that cooperation between the world's top 2 polluters on climate change should be encouraged rather than politicized. The 3 books providing different perspectives on China shed light on its political system and future trajectory. Each book presents unique insights, from examining China's historical political structure to Xi Jinping's attempts to rewrite history and the resistance of dissidents. While there are concerns about China's intentions, a more measured view suggests that a new era of relative reopening may be possible in the future. The U.S. ban on NVIDIA selling AI chips to China is significant, as it reflects the ongoing trade tensions between the two countries. The ban, which was implemented earlier than expected, highlights the U.S. government's efforts to restrict China's access to advanced technologies. However, NVIDIA downplaying the impact suggests that it may not have a significant financial effect on the company. The criticism of UN Secretary General Guterres for his lack of action on China's human rights abuses against the Uyghur people is concerning. The call for him to take action and speak out against the Uyghur genocide is growing. It raises questions about the value placed on cooperation with China versus addressing human rights concerns. Governor Newsom's meeting with President Xi Jinping presents an opportunity to improve ties between China and the U.S., particularly in the context of climate change. As exchanges between Chinese and American officials increase, the possibility of a visit by Xi to the U.S. next month adds to the anticipation of potential progress in bilateral relations. Lastly, the escalating tensions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea are a cause for concern. The naval collisions and disputes over territorial waters highlight the ongoing territorial disputes in the region. The breakdown in relations between the two nations underscores the challenges of maintaining peace and stability in the South China Sea. In conclusion, these news stories shed light on the complex dynamics between China and various countries, as well as the challenges and opportunities they present. It's essential to consider multiple perspectives and maintain a nuanced understanding of the issues at hand. As always, I invite you, my esteemed viewers, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your thoughts on these developments? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.